The sun hung high in the brilliant blue sky, casting shimmering reflections across the surface of Sarah's backyard pool. The gentle hum of cicadas filled the warm summer air as she sank deeper into her lounge chair, the cool water just inches away. It was the kind of perfect day she'd dreamed about when she bought her home in this quiet HOA community, a safe place with friendly neighbors, well-maintained lawns, and clear, fair rules, a place where she could finally relax and call her own. But that peace shattered in the blink of an eye. A sharp knock on the front door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the window, she saw no one. Only a crisp white envelope, tucked neatly under the door frame. Curious, she crossed the patio and picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. The envelope bore the HOA's official seal. Sarah's heart quickened. Something about the timing felt ominous. She tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. Her eyes scanned the typed words and then widened in disbelief. Dear homeowner, it has come to the attention of the board of directors that your use of the backyard pool violates newly established community regulations. Effective immediately, you are prohibited from accessing or using your pool until further notice. Failure to comply will result in fines and possible legal action. Sincerely, the HOA board. The letter ended there. No explanation, no mention of what rule she had broken. No prior warning, just an abrupt, chilling order that struck like a blow. Sarah stared at the paper, her mind racing. What? How could this be? She had lived here for 5 years. Her pool had been her sanctuary through hot summer days and stressful nights. No one had ever mentioned any pool restrictions before. Her phone buzzed with a message from her neighbor, Mark. Did you get the letter? They're trying this with everyone, I hear. Sarah's stomach twisted. Everyone! This wasn't just about her pool. It was something bigger. Something sneaky. The rest of the day blurred. Calls to the HOA office went unanswered or were met with vague reassurances and promises of clarifications soon. But Sarah sensed an unspoken agenda lurking behind the board's polite words. That night, as twilight deepened and shadows stretched across the neighborhood, Sarah sat on her porch, clutching the letter. She replayed every interaction she'd ever had with the HOA. Had she missed some hidden meeting? A secret vote? How had this new rule slipped under her radar? A sudden chill crawled up her spine. The pool, her private oasis, now felt like a trap. She had a sinking feeling this was only the beginning. As she closed the envelope and looked up at the darkening sky, one question echoed louder than the crickets. Why now? Why would the HOA board, the very people entrusted to protect the community, turn against her so suddenly? And what else were they trying to hide? The answers would come soon enough, but Sarah was already preparing herself. This was no longer just about a pool. It was a battle she hadn't expected to fight in her own backyard. The next morning, Sarah woke with a knot in her stomach. The sun's warm rays streaming through her window did little to ease the chill of uncertainty that had settled deep inside her. She needed answers, and fast. Her first stop was the HOA clubhouse, a modest brick building that usually felt like the community's heart, but today, it felt cold, distant, even hostile. She stepped inside and found a few residents gathered in hushed conversations, their faces tight with worry. Sarah's eyes locked with Mark's across the room. He gave her a brief nod, the same tension visible in his expression. At the front desk, the receptionist's smile was polite, but tight-lipped. I'm sorry, ma'am. The board meeting was yesterday. The pool rule passed, but the details haven't been made public yet. Sarah blinked in disbelief. Passed? When? How? She hadn't received any notice about a meeting, let alone one that would change the rules so drastically. The receptionist shrugged apologetically. "I know it's sudden, but it's all official now." Sarah's frustration boiled over. "Can I speak to a board member?" The receptionist hesitated, before nodding toward a small conference room. "Mr. Jenkins is still here, but he's busy." Summoning her courage, Sarah knocked and stepped inside. Mr. Jenkins, the HOA president, looked up from his papers. He was a tall man with a neat grey beard and eyes that flickered with calculation. "Ms. Davis," he said formally, "I understand you have concerns about the pool regulation." Sarah forced calm into her voice. "Yes. I want to know what rule I'm supposed to have broken. The letter was vague, and no one has explained why I can't use my pool anymore." Jenkins shifted in his seat. The board passed a new amendment last week, restricting pool usage to certain hours and conditions. It's to ensure safety and maintain community standards. Sarah frowned. "But I never received any notice of that meeting or vote. I live here too. How could this happen without informing residents?" Jenkins' jaw tightened. The meeting was a special session, called with proper notice sent to all homeowners. "Perhaps your mailing address was outdated." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She'd updated her address months ago. "And why target my pool specifically?" she pressed. "Other neighbors haven't received any letters." "Complaints were made," Jenkins said curtly. "We're enforcing the rules evenly." Sarah shook her head. "I haven't had a single complaint from anyone." "This feels personal." The conversation ended abruptly as Jenkins excused himself to attend another matter. Sarah left the room feeling more confused and suspicious than ever. Later, she knocked on neighbors' doors, trying to gather information. Many were tight-lipped, avoiding eye contact. One elderly woman whispered, "They're making changes behind closed doors. If you ask too many questions, you might find yourself on the wrong side of the board." Sarah's pulse quickened. The community she thought she knew was suddenly a maze of secrets and silent threats. Back at home, she sat at her kitchen table, piles of HOA documents spread before her. She pulled up the original covenants, hunting for any mention of pool restrictions. Hours passed, but the only rules about pools were vague guidelines about maintenance and safety, not outright bans. Her phone buzzed with another message. "Be careful. You're stirring up things some would rather keep buried." The room seemed to close in around her. Sarah realized this wasn't just a bureaucratic mix-up. Someone wanted her silenced. The next step was clear. She had to find out the truth behind this mysterious new rule. But with every question she asked, the stakes rose. Was the HOA hiding something worse than just a pool ban? As dusk settled outside, Sarah stared out at the dark water of her forbidden pool. It sparkled mockingly under the streetlights, a symbol of a fight she hadn't asked for but couldn't walk away from. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, but Sarah felt restless. The events of the past 2 days played relentlessly in her mind, like a dark storm cloud threatening to burst. She knew she couldn't rely on the HOA board's half-truths or evasions. If she was going to fight back, she needed solid evidence, something that no board member could ignore. Her first move was to visit the county recorder's office, downtown. The building was an imposing structure of cold stone and heavy glass, filled with the quiet rustling of papers and the faint smell of ink and dust. The clerk at the front desk smiled politely as she explained her purpose. "I'm here to get the official deed and covenants for my property," Sarah said, handing over her address. Minutes later, she was led to a reading room where she could examine the documents, the legal backbone of her home and the community. Sarah carefully unrolled the thick yellowed pages of the original deed and HOA covenants. The fine print was daunting, the legal jargon dense and convoluted, but she was determined. Her eyes scanned every paragraph, hunting for anything related to pools, property rights, or restrictions. Hours slipped by, unnoticed. Then, buried deep within the pages, she found it. A clause that felt like a hidden gem amid the legal labyrinth. It read, "Each homeowner retains the unrestricted right to maintain, use, and enjoy personal amenities on their property, including pools, subject only to reasonable safety guidelines established by the community." The words hit her like a lightning bolt. Unrestricted right. That meant the HOA couldn't just swoop in and ban pool use arbitrarily. Only reasonable safety guidelines applied, and Sarah hadn't seen any new safety rules communicated to her, let alone ones that banned pool use outright. Her heart pounded. Could this be the key to challenging the board's actions? But the plot thickened. Further down, Sarah found a mysterious, handwritten note in the margins of one page. A note that didn't appear on the official scanned copy she'd reviewed online before. The note was dated just a month ago and signed with an obscure initials. Board Review Committee. It mentioned a pending amendment regarding amenity restrictions. Language vague enough to be manipulated. And it hinted at a strategy to consolidate control over homeowner amenities. Sarah frowned. This wasn't just a simple update. This was a power move. And it was hidden from homeowners like her. The realization hit hard. The HOA wasn't just mismanaging rules. Someone was deliberately obscuring information to push through changes without scrutiny. Her phone buzzed again with an anonymous message. "You're closer than you think. Keep digging, but watch your back." Chills ran down Sarah's spine. The mystery was deepening, and the stakes were higher than she'd imagined. That evening, she returned home, clutching copies of the deed and notes she'd made. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions. Who was behind this shadowy committee? What was their ultimate goal? And why was the community letting it happen without resistance? As she stared at her darkened pool outside, its surface still shimmering faintly in the moonlight, Sarah made a silent vow. She wouldn't let her rights or her home be stolen in the shadows. This battle was no longer just about a pool ban. It was about exposing the hidden power plays, threatening every homeowner's freedom. The first move had been made. Now the real fight was about to begin. Sarah knew she couldn't face the HOA alone. The documents she uncovered hinted at a deep, covert agenda, one that involved more than just her pool. But in a community where neighbors kept their heads down, would anyone stand with her? Or was she about to discover just how isolated she truly was? Her first stop was Mark's house, the neighbor who had texted her about the pool ban, spreading quietly through the community. Mark opened the door cautiously, his eyes flickering with a mix of curiosity and concern. "I'm digging into this, Mark," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "The HOA's hiding stuff in the deed amendments. Someone's trying to tighten control over all our amenities." Mark swallowed hard. "I've seen the same thing. A few months ago, I tried asking questions at the board meeting. They brushed me off, told me I was making waves for no reason." Sarah nodded. "I got a threatening note last night. I don't know who sent it, but it's clear they want to scare me off." Mark looked around nervously. "You're not the only one. I heard the Petersons stopped hosting block parties after some board members showed up uninvited. The message was clear: don't rock the boat." The weight of his words sank in. The HOA's influence ran deep, twisting from official meetings into whispered threats and social pressure. But Mark wasn't ready to give up. "We need to find more people who feel the same," Sarah said. If we can build a coalition, maybe we can push back. Over the next few days, Sarah knocked on doors, looking for allies. Some neighbors answered cautiously, polite but unwilling to speak freely. Others refused outright, their eyes darting, way as if afraid to get involved. An older woman, Mrs. Carmichael, whispered from behind her curtains. The board controls everything. You don't want to make enemies there. Sarah pressed gently. But don't you think it's wrong? Shouldn't we all know what's happening? Mrs. Carmichael sighed, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. Maybe. But I've lived here 20 years. When you stir the hornet's nest, you get stung. Each encounter made Sarah's mission clearer. The board had crafted a culture of fear and silence. But she wasn't deterred. The quiet bravery of Mark and a few others fueled her resolve. One evening at a small neighborhood gathering, Sarah quietly shared what she'd learned. The room was tense, eyes flickering between her and the darkened windows. A young father, James, finally spoke up. My kids love the pool. They're devastated they can't swim. This rule feels like punishment, not protection. Another neighbor nodded. We've been paying HOA fees for years. But who's watching the board? Slowly, a handful of voices joined in. They spoke of vague notices, unexplained fees, and meetings that felt like secret clubs. But then, the door swung open suddenly. Two well-dressed men in suits entered. The HOA's legal counsel and the board's treasurer. The atmosphere froze. We're here to remind everyone that any unauthorized gatherings or discussions about HOA matters violate community policy, the lawyer said. Voice sharp as a blade, Sarah's heart pounded. The message was clear. The board wasn't just hiding documents. They were actively suppressing dissent. After the men left, the crowd dispersed quickly. Sarah remained, feeling the weight of isolation deepen, but also a fierce determination. She wasn't just fighting for her pool anymore. She was fighting to break the silence, to reclaim her community's voice. That night, Sarah sat by her pool, the water dark and still. She glanced at her phone. A new message appeared. You're making waves. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. The game was changing. Friends and foes were harder to tell apart. But Sarah knew one thing. For sure, she wasn't backing down. The night wrapped around Sarah's house like a heavy blanket. Thick with silence, but crackling with tension. She had never felt so exposed in her own home. The pool, once a symbol of freedom and peace, now seemed like a dark mirror reflecting the dangers lurking beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect neighborhood. Earlier that day, she'd been at the grocery store when her phone buzzed relentlessly in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a string of messages from an unknown number. Stop digging or face the consequences. The words were simple but chilling. No name, no explanation, just a clear warning. Her hands trembled as she locked the screen and quickly glanced around. The store felt unusually crowded, and the glances she caught seemed sharper, heavier. Was someone watching her? Following her, she hurried home, her mind racing with questions. Was this a prank, or a sinister attempt to intimidate her into silence? Either way, it was clear. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. That evening, as dusk faded to black, Sarah sat on her porch, a faint breeze rustling the leaves. She debated whether to call the police, but without concrete proof. She worried it might only provoke her unknown adversaries further. Her phone buzzed again. You've been warned. Stop before it's too late. Sarah's heart pounded. Fear and anger collided inside her. She refused to be bullied, but the threat was a cold reminder that this fight wasn't just about HOA bylaws or pool usage anymore. It had become personal. Just then, her dog Max growled softly from the backyard. Sarah stood up and peered into the darkness. The pool was barely visible, shimmering faintly under the moonlight. A shadow moved near the fence line. She blinked, hard. Maybe it was just her imagination, but her gut screamed otherwise. Sarah grabbed a flashlight and cautiously stepped into the yard. The beam cut through the night, illuminating the familiar shapes of garden furniture, flower beds, and then, at the edge of the property, a figure darted away. "Hey!" she called out, voice steady. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, the figure disappeared into the neighbor's yard. Sarah's heart hammered. Was this connected to the threats? Was someone spying on her, waiting for a moment to act? Her mind flashed back to the board meeting. The secret amendment, the threatening notes slipped under her door. The peaceful facade of her neighborhood was cracking. The next morning, Sarah resolved to increase her vigilance. She installed security cameras around her property and reached out to the few neighbors she trusted. Mark offered to keep an eye out during his evening walks, and James promised to watch for any suspicious activity. But even with allies, Sarah felt the isolation gnawing at her. The threat wasn't just from an abstract HOA board. It was from unknown individuals willing to cross the line to silence her. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the community shifted. Whispers grew louder but wary. Neighbors glanced over their shoulders, and the usual casual greetings felt strained. One afternoon, Sarah received a call from an unknown number. The voice was distorted but clear. "We warned you, Sarah. Back off the pool issue, or things will get worse." She hung up, her hands shaking. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. That night, as she lay in bed, Sarah stared at the ceiling. She realized that her quiet life was gone. This was no longer just a battle over a pool ban. It was a war for her home, her safety, and her right to stand up for what was hers. But Sarah wasn't ready to surrender. If anything, the threats only strengthened her resolve. Tomorrow she would meet with a lawyer to explore her legal options, and she would continue digging, exposing every hidden secret the HOA wanted buried. Because no one, not the board, not shadowy threats in the dark, was going to steal her home without a fight. The morning sun spilled through the blinds, but Sarah barely noticed. Her mind was tangled in strategy, documents, and the looming confrontation that could change everything. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day she would face the HOA board, armed with her discoveries and legal counsel. She sat at her kitchen table, stacks of papers spread before her. The original deed, the cryptic handwritten notes, the threatening messages. Every detail mattered now. She knew that the upcoming board meeting wouldn't be a simple discussion. It would be a battlefield. Her phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer. Rachel, a sharp and experienced attorney Sarah had contacted days earlier. "Be ready, we're going in strong." I reviewed the covenants. The board overstepped. This isn't just a grey area. It's outright abuse of power. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. But the truth was, she was terrified. Not just of the board, but of what might happen if she lost. The community buzzed with rumors. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones about her fight. Some praised her courage. Others warned her to tread carefully. The tension was palpable. At the HOA clubhouse that evening, Sarah arrived early, her heart hammering. The room was packed. Residents, board members, even a few outsiders. The air was thick with anticipation. Mr. Jenkins, the board president, looked composed but guarded. The legal counsel sat at his side, poised and ready. Rachel greeted Sarah with a confident nod. "Let's show them the power of the deed," she whispered. The meeting began with routine announcements. Then the board president cleared his throat, eyes flickering to Sarah. "Ms. Davis, "We understand you have concerns regarding the recent pool regulation," he said smoothly. Sarah stood, her voice steady, despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Yes, I have evidence that the board's new pool ban violates the original deed and community covenants. I demand this rule be rescinded immediately." Murmurs rippled through the room. Rachel stepped forward, presenting copies of the deed. Clause: each homeowner retains the unrestricted right to maintain, use, and enjoy personal amenities, including pools. Her voice was firm as she outlined the board's failure to notify residents properly and their attempts to suppress dissent. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Jenkins tried to regain control. The board acted within its authority to protect community safety and standards. Rachel cut in sharply. "Safety guidelines do not mean arbitrary bans, without clear communicated rules. This is abuse of authority." Then, the unexpected happened. An older man from the back, a longtime resident who rarely spoke, stood up. "I've sat on this board before. This recent ban isn't about safety. It's about control. Control over what we can do in our own yards." The room tensed. The man revealed documents, emails he had saved, that suggested some board members had financial interests in a local pool maintenance company. The implication was explosive. The pool ban could benefit private contractors while punishing homeowners. Gasps filled the room. Mr. Jenkins' face flushed red. The legal counsel frowned, but said nothing. Rachel seized the moment. "This is corruption. The community deserves transparency, not secret deals and intimidation." Voices rose, some shouting support, others demanding calm. The meeting devolved into chaos. Sarah's heart pounded, caught in the whirlwind of outrage and disbelief. The stakes had just skyrocketed. The board president called for order, but the damage was done. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah stepped outside into the cool night air. Neighbors approached her with words of encouragement and newfound hope. The tide was turning, but Sarah knew the fight wasn't over. There would be backlash. There would be more threats. But tonight, justice had edged closer. As she looked up at the stars, Sarah whispered, "This is just the beginning." The victory at the meeting was bittersweet. The explosive revelations about the board's secret financial ties had shaken the community, but they also unleashed a storm. Sarah sensed that the real puppet masters behind the scenes were still lurking in the shadows, pulling strings, and manipulating from afar. The next morning, her phone buzzed non-stop with messages, some supportive, others ominous. But one message stood out. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest. Stop digging, or we'll make you regret it." Sarah's resolve hardened. She wasn't about to back down now. If anything, this only confirmed how deep the corruption went. Determined to expose the full extent of the HOA's deception, Sarah called Mark and James for an emergency meeting. They gathered in Sarah's living room, maps, documents, and laptops spread across the coffee table. "We need to figure out who really controls the board," Sarah said, eyes blazing. "Who profits from these shady deals, and how deep the corruption runs." Mark tapped on his tablet. "I did some digging into the board members' backgrounds. A few have connections to local businesses, but some links are more obscure." James leaned forward. "There's one name that keeps coming up. Richard Caldwell. He's not officially on the board, but he's been influencing decisions for years, through proxies." Sarah frowned. "Who is he?" Mark explained. "Caldwell is a wealthy developer with interests in the area. He's known for aggressive tactics to control property values and amenities to suit his investments." The pieces started clicking together. Caldwell's influence could explain the sudden amendments and why the board seemed so intent on restricting homeowners' freedoms. Sarah felt a cold chill. This wasn't just local HOA politics. It was a calculated power play by an outsider with money and influence. She realized that exposing Caldwell would be dangerous but necessary. Over the next few days, Sarah and her allies gathered evidence, public records, financial disclosures, and discreet interviews with residents who had witnessed Caldwell's heavy hand. But the deeper they delved, the more resistance they encountered. Anonymous emails warning them to stop. Vandalism at Mark's home. James's dog found sickened by poison. The fight was turning ugly, yet the community's spirit was stirring. More neighbors joined Sarah's cause, sharing stories of intimidation and unfair fines imposed by the board. One afternoon, Sarah received a package with no return address. Inside was a flash drive labeled Truth. Her hands shook as she plugged it into her computer. The files contained internal HOA emails, discussions between Caldwell's operatives and board members, plotting to manipulate vote outcomes, suppress dissent, and funnel contracts to preferred businesses. The evidence was undeniable. Caldwell's fingerprints were all over the scheme. Sarah knew this could bring the entire corrupt network down, but it also made her a prime target. That evening, as she locked her front door, a black SUV idled suspiciously across the street. The driver's eyes flicked toward her before speeding away. Sarah's pulse quickened. The war wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was a fight for the soul of her community, and the stakes had never been higher. She wasn't just a homeowner. She was the whistleblower, and she had to stay strong, no matter what, because if she faltered, the puppet masters would tighten their grip, and every homeowner's rights would vanish into the shadows. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of uncertainty. Sarah's every step was shadowed by unseen eyes. The threats hadn't stopped, and the community was tense, torn between hope and fear. But Sarah refused to let intimidation win. With Rachel's help, she compiled the damning evidence from the flash drive, the deed, and eyewitness accounts into a comprehensive report. Together, they filed a formal complaint with the county and contacted the local news. The reaction was immediate. Journalists arrived, cameras flashing, shining a spotlight on the HOA's corrupt practices. Residents, once silent and fearful, now spoke out openly, sharing stories of harassment, unfair fines, and secret deals. The board was forced to call a special meeting, this time under public scrutiny. Caldwell's proxies tried to downplay the allegations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Pressure mounted from the county and state regulators. An official investigation was launched. Sarah felt a cautious surge of victory. Then just when she thought the worst was behind her, the final twist landed. During the investigation, it was revealed that one of the key board members who had opposed Sarah was, in fact, a whistleblower himself. He had been gathering evidence secretly for months, waiting for the right moment to expose Caldwell's influence. This man, Mr. Leonard, a quiet, unassuming figure, had risked everything to bring the truth to light. Sarah met with Leonard privately. "Why did you stay silent for so long?" she asked. He sighed. "Fear. Like many, I was trapped between loyalty and conscience. But your courage gave me hope." Together, they became an unstoppable force for reform. With Caldwell's grip broken and the corrupt board members removed, new elections were held. Sarah, Mark, and other reformers were elected to rebuild the community with transparency and respect for homeowners' rights. The pool ban was lifted immediately. On a warm Sunday afternoon, the community gathered by the pool once more. Children laughed, splashing in the water. while neighbors chatted and celebrated the hard-won victory. Sarah stood by the edge, the sun warming her face. The battle had been exhausting and dangerous, but the outcome was worth every moment yet. Even in victory, Sarah knew vigilance was essential. Power could corrupt, and shadows could return. But for now, she had reclaimed her home and her community's voice. As the sun dipped low, Sarah whispered quietly to herself, "This is our home, and no one will take it from us again."